In this video, I'm going to give a little run through of some of the changes made in the penguin models as they progressed from the early A models to the B and D models, and then eventually the Beaver ATV came along, which used the same equipment, I believe, as the B and D model penguins. We're going to talk mostly about tires today. And we're going to start over here looking at this A model penguin. Now this is an A model penguin. It's not one of the first A model penguins. This penguin has on it, as we can see here, a paddle. This is of course the rear wheel that we're looking at. The penguin's on its side, of course. And this paddle would originally have had these rubber blades on it to help push the penguin through the water. Now, the paddle was used with a different tire. We'll go back over to the trailer. That is the tire that the paddle would have been used with. A Goodyear Terra tire in a turf tread. An all-weather tread, actually, it says on there. So we'll go back here, just take a quick look. So that was the Terra tire all-weather tread. This is the Terra tire Terra tread. Paddle wheel, the aluminum paddle wheel, the paddle blades, and we'll be discussing this scraper. The scraper should be a little closer to the tire actually, and its intent was to prevent water from being churned around. So instead of the water just going back up into the wheel well, since the rear tire was mostly underwater, it would help push the water backwards, so that would give the penguin a little more forward propulsion in the water. While we're here, we'll also look in the center of the rim. This being an A model, the center of the axle is threaded on the outside, and there's a nut holding the wheel on. And in all penguins, and in beavers too, there are 4 bolts sticking through the outer rim half with nuts and washers on them that held the rim together. The rim is a 2-piece design. And if we go over here, well, we're talking axle. Now this axle what we have here is a trailer, but this uses the same bearing and seal housing and axle as the B and D model penguins and the beavers, and this uses a bolt instead of a externally threaded design with a nut. Now earlier trailers probably used the same axle as the A model penguins. Okay, so we'll go back over here to quote some stuff from this Pengor Limited Service News Bulletin, released just recently on May 15th of 1964. So, the topic is water performance. And it says here, during the early production of A models, the all-weather tires were used, and to obtain water propulsion, it was necessary to use paddle wheels and rubber paddle blades with scrapers. And the scrapers are a specific part number. On all vehicles up to serial number A1037, it was necessary to use 4th gear to obtain top speed. After serial number A1037, all vehicles were equipped with Terra grip tires, and paddle blades were eliminated. The paddle wheel was retained to act as a mudslinger. And these new tires used a new scraper. So this is penguin serial that we're leaning on is serial number A1113. So it's after the A1037 serial number. So it has the Terra tread tire, the Terra grip tire with the new paddle wheel and no paddle blades, but it keeps the paddle. Now here it states that all B and D models will have paddle wheels eliminated and replaced with a new mudslinger, which we'll see actually here, this is the new mudslinger that interfaces with the seal and bearing that's in that housing. And back to our documentation here, it says, and with those tires used on the B&D models, they'll also use a scraper which can't be used on A model bodies. So A's used a scraper of one design with the smoother tire, then they went to a different scraper when they used this tread of tire, and then the B models and D models used this tire and a different scraper once again. Now it also says while we're here that vehicles with the Terra Grip tires, these more aggressive tires, they will operate most effectively in third gear, and during all water operations no more than half throttle needs to be used. And yes, it says here scrapers should be located so there's less than a 1/4 inch between scraper and tire tread. So these scrapers on this Penguin should be adjusted so I can get more water speed out of it. Okay, so we'll go back here and take a look at the rest of the stuff on the trailer. Get my phone/camera clipped in place and it will steady. Okay, so what we see on the trailer here are the early model tires that were used on the early A models. This is a 16 by 12 by 6 all-weather tread. And then we see the Terra Grip tire with, and it's a 16 by 15 by 6. So these were used on early A's and later A's. These were used on early A models. These were used on later A models and B and D models. And this design of tire was used on Beavers, but it may have only been on them in a 14.5 6, so a slightly different size. Now these tires are both on their side, and we can see there's a considerable difference between the 16-12 6 and the 16-15 6. If my math is right, that should be about 3 inches. So the 1/2 inch difference between this tire and the one on the Beaver would be barely noticeable. Now, as a note, this tire here, the all-weather tread, may have also been used on trailers and may have stayed on the trailers throughout the production. I'm not sure. But water propulsion wouldn't necessarily be a factor on the trailer, so they may have used any stock of these tires they had up on trailers. Now, let's see what else we got here. We have front tires. This is the most common tire that I've seen on the front of Penguins. I also have seen it on the front of Beavers, although not exclusively, and I have it on a Beaver trailer that I have. Now, this tire is a common size. It's 4.8, 4 by 8, which is a common trailer tire and wheelbarrow tire. This particular tire, as used on the Penguin and Beaver, was a 2-ply tire. It was run at a low pressure. Since there's no suspension on either machine, the low pressure would have been used to absorb bumps. So there are a lot of options if you want to replace this tire. I've actually seen this same tire, the 2-ply rib tread all-weather tire by Goodyear, used on Cub Cadet lawn tractors, older Cub Cadet lawn tractors. You may see these tires in good condition on a certain auction site coming off of those tractors, those lawn tractors. Now, I've also seen these tires recently, as in the last, say, 15 years, used on round balers. New Idea is the one brand that comes to mind. I think there was another one. Now, I'm not sure if you ordered tires from the farm tractor supply companies that sold those balers, if you would get this tread of tire, or if they would simply find a tire that size with a round tread surface and supply a different tire that would fit the machine. Anyway, those tires were a common size at least, and what I do is I go the economy route. This tire is available through Princess Auto in my area. I find it on sale, actually, with a rim and tube for less than what they normally want for the tire. It's the right size, it's the right shape, the tread has got a curved face to it, it's not flat, and it comes with the tube fairly cheap, so it fits and works. I don't know how long they last, but they can be run at low pressure since these are also a 2-ply tire, and that's what I use. But again, this is the front tires, and there are lots of options. Unfortunately, for the rear tires, even though they came in 3 different sizes, to the best of my knowledge, the only company that produced these tires was Goodyear, and they only produced them for a short period of time. When I mean short period, I mean from the early 60s to possibly early 70s. Anyway, I've done some research and tried contacting Goodyear and Goodyear tire dealers, and apparently any molds that were used to make these tires, I've been told, have been destroyed, so the possibility of them suddenly deciding to reproduce these tires, or produce more of them I should say, are fairly low. But anyway, first of all, there are options to keep these tires, these 3 tires, inflated. Now, a lot of them have got weather cracked over the years. After all, they're about 50 years old or more. A lot of these machines sit outside. They sit with the weight of the machine on the tires get cracked. They split and they leak out through the sidewall, or even without the air in them, the tires relax, the rim's exposed to moisture, it corrodes, and the tire just doesn't want to hold air. Well, I have some suggestions for that. First of all, here is the inner half of a rear rim. The outer half looks kind of the same, only it bolts on, and of course it tapers in the other direction. But this rim half is very dirty. It's corroded. I'm not using it because it's actually broken down here. But if this rim was in usable condition, I would clean it with a wire wheel from the edge of the surface here where the tire sits, up to and including this top surface here where the 2 pieces of the rim mate. The recess where there's an O-ring sitting there. It may be hard to tell at this distance, but there's an O-ring there. So I would clean that all up with a wire brush, check the O-ring, make sure it's not rock hard or split or has big depressions in it where it could leak. And then I would take grease, similar to this grease. This is just a grease I happen to have in my shop. It's clear when it goes on. It looks a lot like Vaseline actually, and Vaseline may be something that could be used in place of this grease. So what I do with the grease is I apply it to this area here on the rim after the rim is all clean. This is the area about where the tire starts to touch when the rim's assembled with the tire on it. And I put a smear of grease all the way around. It doesn't need to have a lot on it, just a light smear. And then I also cover this surface here and the groove that the O-ring sits in. Then I also do the same area, like this area that would be on the other half of the rim, near where the tire would touch, where the taper changes a little bit, where the tire would seal. Then I would make sure the hole in the rim where the tire valve is clean, and I would install a new valve. These valves are simply tubeless tire valves meant for mostly cars. This particular valve is 1 1/4 inches long, but the thing we need to watch for is the 0.625 inch rim hole. That's the size of the hole in the rim, and this valve of course has to be a snug fit in there or it will leak. Now I also apply a little grease right here where the valve goes into the rim, just to help seal, just in case. Little bit of grease on it won't hurt it. It might help to seal it. So we put a new valve in it. We grease it here, here, and in the corresponding area on the other half. Put the O-ring on, set the tire on, put the other half of the rim on, put the nuts and washers on it, tighten it down, and hopefully we can get it to take air and start to seal fairly easily without too much effort. Sometimes they can be a bit of a challenge to get air to stay in them enough that you can inflate it, and then hopefully air will stay in it for a while. If you find that with grease the tire still doesn't hold air, I would spray the tire with a soapy water solution and see where the leaks are. It's entirely possible that something has punctured the tread surface. That's fairly common, of course, but it's also possible that the sidewall of the tire has become weather checked enough and cracked enough that air is leaking through the sidewall. Of course, I wouldn't recommend this on any other vehicle. Since we're not going down the highway on this thing, we're not going far off into the bush by ourselves, and since there isn't much alternative in the way of tires for these things, if these tires are leaking through the sidewall, I have recently tried something like this. This is just something I happen to find locally. I think it's similar to a product we see advertised on TV where you can cut a hole in your boat, put a screen in it, and then spray it with this and still have a boat that floats. But I used this entire can, one coat at a time, letting it dry between coats, on the inside of a Penguin tire, which is on the green Penguin, which is just barely visible here. We can see the nose of the Penguin, but the tire on the back of that Penguin has been holding air since last fall. And I don't use that machine a lot. It doesn't get a lot of use, but the tire's been holding air, so it seems to work at least to hold it up off the ground. Now, if your tires are really far gone and you're thinking, what can I do to replace the tires with another tire? Well, since we're kind of stuck to this size tire, or these size tires on this rim, because of the rim diameter and the width when it's assembled, we have to find a tire that fits a 6-inch rim between 6 and 15 inches wide that fits in this wheel well. And I think our choices are very limited. As a matter of fact, I don't think I've ever found a tire that would fit. Pardon me. So I think what we could do possibly is adapt another tire and rim to this axle. Now, this axle, it rides on a bearing, a taper bearing, and there is a seal here to keep water and dirt out of the bearing. Now, the rim here, the center of the hub mates to the seal and the bearing, and when the bolt is in, the hub of the rim, the center part of the rim, maintains tension on the bearing, and the seal works to keep water and dirt out. So I would think, and I haven't tried this, if we used this half of the rim, bolted it on with the center bolt here, adjusted the bearings, and then we made a plate that fit over the 4 bolts and, well, the center bolt as well, and made it to adapt to another rim that would fit another tire that fit this wheel well and was about the same volume as these tires, that might work. Now, the reason I say this volume of tire, or at least this volume of tire as a minimum, if you intend to use your machine in the water, of course the tires provide some buoyancy in the water since they're filled with air. Actually, if I've read that the Penguin claimed to be unsinkable, and I can only assume that it is because of the tires that they say it's unsinkable, although it would float upside down if you tried to sink it. Anyway, if you can keep any tire that you are attempting to, or I should say are adapting to this wheel, the same volume as this, the same diameter and width, then water flotation may not be a problem. I think if you went any smaller than this 16-12-6, I think then water flotation might be an issue, especially since the brochures for the B models say the water capacity is 300 pounds. I'm not sure how much of that you lose by going to this smaller tire. I'd actually have to look at an A model brochure, which I just thought of. But anyway, Shooting for this tire would be ideal, maybe even going a little wider, but again, we're restricted in diameter by the wheel well. Anyway, that is a little history of some of the changes through the A, B, and D model Penguins, which eventually carried over onto the Beaver, and my thoughts on adapting a different tire to the rear of either machine. Anyway, I hope this has been informative. If you have any questions, comments, please feel free to place them in the comments below. If you've adapted a wheel to one of these machines, I'm sure I and others would be glad to hear how you did it. And again, comments and suggestions are welcome. Thank you for watching.